Hi, I'm Andy Jones, content editor for Plaid's online education program, Let's Paint, and I'll give you one guess what we're doing in today's skill builder. If you guessed Buffalo Plaid, you're absolutely right. Come on, let's paint. We don't exactly know if Paul Bunyan had anything to do with Buffalo Plaid, but we do know that it was invented or first manufactured by the Woolrich Woolen Mill Company. They did that in about 1850, so Buffalo Plaid has been an enduring textile for about 150 years. And today I'm going to show you my method of doing it with paint and tape. I think just about anyone who does a Buffalo Plaid has their own special method to do it. And it just has to be the method that works best for you. When I start to do Buffalo Plaid, I usually make it the width of a tape, whether it's a 2-inch tape or a 1-inch tape or a 3/4-inch tape. That's the size checks that I usually use. I recommend that you measure the width of your tape, because this 2-inch tape is not quite 2 inches across. It's about 1 7/8 inch. So if you're measuring in 2-inch increments, it's not going to line up for you. So measure your tape every time. So I'm going to take a piece of blue tape, and I've already got some little marks on my surface. And let's talk about how I prepped this surface, because it's a little bit more involved than just base coating it. I base coated this using Folk Art acrylic paint. The color was Naphthol Crimson, and then I brushed a coat of Folk Art water-based varnish over the entire surface. And I did that because I wanted this surface to be completely sealed and to have a little bit of protection so that I don't have to worry about any paint being pulled up by my tape. So that's just an extra little tip there to seal your surface with some water-based varnish. Now, I'm going to line up my tape with the little marks that I've put on my surface, and I'm worried about only 1/2 of the tape at the time, so I'm just going to gently press that onto the surface and then lay the tape down and gently press this other side. To make sure that my tape is adhered to the surface and secure, I'm using what's called a burnishing tool, and this tool has a stylus at one end and a flat plastic at the end. You put the flat plastic down on the edge of your tape, and you gently press and rub the edge of the tape into place. Now please do not try to burnish over the entire width of the tape. I'm only concerned about the edge that's touching the surface, and that's the only edge that you need to be concerned about as well. It doesn't matter if the tape is pressed down in the center or not. Now, if you don't have a burnishing tool, you can just use the back of your fingernail and you can press it down that way. If you've got miles of tape to put down, that'll start to burn your finger a little bit and it'll be uncomfortable. Some people say that you can use a credit card, but I think if you invest in the proper tool, you'll find yourself using this burnishing tool and stylus all the time. So you can order these online if you can't find them at your local craft store. All right, so that's how I tape off my plaid in one direction. So I'm going to set this to the side, and we're going to mix up our paint that we're going to use. So the paint that we're going to use for this traditional Buffalo Plaid is, we've got our red background and we're going to put our black checks on, and I'm using Folk Art acrylic, and the color is Pure Black. And this is the original formula of Folk Art, which is my preferred formula of paint. I've used this since the early 70s and I've never needed any other paint. So I'm going to make my paint transparent by combining my Folk Art acrylic paint with Folk Art water-based varnish, and this is a satin finish, so I'm going to put some of that out on my palette, and I'm going to use a palette knife and I'm going to mix some black into my varnish, and I'm going to mix this thoroughly because what I want to make is a transparent black color, but I don't want it to be thin and runny like it would be if I just thin down the paint with water. So again, just scooping up some black paint and mixing it in. If I do need to thin this, I can thin it down with water as I paint. But the objective here is to make a nice, transparent black color mixture. Pushing that to a puddle. I'm going to set that aside. Going to clean my palette knife off. Always be in the habit of doing that. And I've got a really big folk art base coating brush. This is a 1.5-inch flat brush, so it's almost the width of my stripe. But I'm going to bring in my prepared and taped off surface, and I'm going to load my brush with my mixture of varnish and paint. And this may be just a little bit too opaque. We'll find that out in just a second when I touch it down to the surface, and that's a little bit darker than I want it to be. So I'm just going to touch my brush in water, and I'm just going to thin this out a little bit and brush this color on. Notice that I'm stroking the length of the stripe, and I'm done with that stripe. Don't keep playing in it, and don't futz around and end up pushing paint up underneath the tape. Put the paint on and leave it alone. That's going to be hard for some people to do, but it's what you have to do. All right, so loading my brush again, I'm going to start. I'm going to put this color on, and I'm going to brush the length of the stripe, and I'm going to leave it alone. If you don't pick up anything else from what I'm teaching you, stroke the color on and leave it alone. You're much more likely to make a mess if you keep putzing in the paint. So again, last stripe I'm going to paint for you. Brush this on, and it is important that you use a large flat brush for this. A small brush and you'll be swiping back and forth too many times. Put it on and leave it alone. Okay, I'm going to set my brush aside, and I'm going to remove the tape. You can either let this dry or you can continue to work while it's wet. The important thing when you remove the tape is to remove it slowly and carefully, folding it back on itself, and just removing the tape slowly and carefully. And you will see that you have a nice clean edge because you have burnished your tape down to the surface. An important thing that I really should have mentioned earlier is that you need to let your background completely dry. I would not recommend putting your tape on a surface that has not dried at least overnight. If you're patient enough, and you can let it dry for a couple of days so that your paint and your water-based varnish that you've sealed it with could dry 24 to 48 hours, lets it dry and cure, and you're less likely to have any tape lift off. So again, I'll pull up one more piece of tape, and again, slowly and carefully pulling the tape directly back on itself, and this is the proper way to remove the tape. And if you've burnished the tape down, you should not have any bleed out. And I'm just holding my breath as I pull the tape off that there won't be any bleeding underneath the tape. And so far, so good. We have no bleed out. Yay! Okay, so pull off all of your tape like this and then let this dry thoroughly. If you can stand to let it dry till the next day, that's best. But I know most of you won't be able to do that, so just let it dry as long as you possibly can. Several hours would be optimal. Then you're going to measure off the width of your tape in the opposite direction, and once again we're going to apply the tape. We'll use our burnishing tool to burnish the edges of the tape down, and then once again we will brush on our transparent black mixture, and this time you'll be doubling it in some areas, so it will be twice as dark as it is in other areas. Again, put it on and leave it alone if you possibly can. All right, so now we are going to remove the tape, pulling it back on itself, And I'm going to turn this, I'm going to move my palette out of the way because I'm done painting. And I'm going to turn this to the side, and you can see that you get your complete red background. You get one layer of color, and then the opposite direction you'll have two layers of color. And this is how you get a traditional Buffalo Plaid check. And it's just as pretty painted in today's fashion colors as it was 150 years ago. Let's just pull off one more row so that you can see. I'll have to come back and pick. That's just tape there. That's not paint that's pulled up. That's my little tape edge. So, had a little bleed out. We'll have to fix that. But just neatly and carefully remove your tape, pulling it back on itself. And that's a very simple yet effective way to paint Buffalo Plaid. I've noticed in home decor recently, there seems to be a lot of Buffalo Plaid that's painted in black and white. And you can simply do that by using a white base coat and then your transparent black done in one direction and then the second direction, so that you get two different tones of black over your white base coat. For fall, you can actually do Buffalo Plaid using a pure orange base coat with a black glaze to create the plaid effect. Or if that seems a little too Halloween to you and you want something that's just a little bit more fall, you could simply use burnt umber and your water-based varnish to make the glaze that you would paint in two directions. You could do it for spring using a yellow background and then maybe a Persian blue glaze in two directions to make your plaid. But this is a simple, easy, effective way to create Buffalo Plaid.